Hello, AGS allies and caregivers. You're listening to our podcast, The Rare Advocates, a caregiver worthy and rare disease podcast brought to you by Aicardi Goutieres Syndrome Advocacy Association, where we update you with the latest news and conversations around Aicardi Goutieres and rare diseases. My name is Betty, producer and marketing director, but most importantly, I'm mom of two little ones. The youngest one, Noah, who was recently diagnosed with Aicardi Goutieres earlier this year. The stories you're about to hear are close to my heart, and I hope they help you as much as they have helped me. Before we get started on today's episode, a special thanks to Ecam Live, who gifted us this all-in-one live streaming and video production studio. With Ecam Live, video creation is easy, professional, and fully customizable. If you can think it, you can create it with Ecam Live. And don't forget to join the conversation. We're now on all social media platforms. Be sure to subscribe and leave a comment or a review wherever you're listening to us from. We're thankful you're here and we hope we can help you in this journey. In today's episode, we have Camille and Shawn who will be sharing the story of their family who was affected by Aicardi Goutieres. They will be talking about the diagnosis, treatment obstacles, and present state. So now I'm going to bring them on to our screen so that you guys can meet Camille and Shawn. Hi, Camille. Hi, Shawn. How are you doing today?
Very good, thank you. Excited to be talking with you today.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. And if I'm correct, you're joining me from Canada?
We are, yeah, from British Columbia.
British Columbia. Never been. How's the weather over there right now?
Well, no snow here, so that's always positive.
When does the snow usually arrive?
We actually live on a little pocket of British Columbia where we don't get snow only a couple days out of the year. So we're one of the few lucky Canadians.
Well, that's good. A few times a year is not bad compared to months.
Yeah.
Good, good. Okay, well, you guys have a very unique story to tell. We all have similarities in the sense that we are all affected, or at least one of our members might be affected by Aicardi Goutieres, but your story is a little bit more unique, and I'm very thankful that you're willing to share this with us so that we can be educated and we can have more awareness, because Aicardi Goutieres has a very diverse spectrum, and I think that's what makes it sometimes very hard to get a diagnosis because it's just so different for everybody. But if you could please start by telling me who in your family is affected by Aicardi Goutieres.
Yeah, so it is both of our children. So they are currently 12 and 14 years old, and they both have the IFI-H1 mutation. And to our surprise, we did find out that my husband is a carrier of the mutation as well. And as you said, when we started this journey, it's hard to identify what are symptoms or indicators of Aicardi Goutieres, and so we realized that all three of them are actually affected by the disease as well. The mutation is affecting all three of them.
What were the first signs? When did you first start noticing that there was something wrong? And I know you said, 3 out of the 4 family members affected. So please feel free to share each one of them or just as a whole.
Sure. Yeah. Well, like you said, our story is quite unique. It definitely didn't unravel the way many other family stories do, which is when the children are quite young. So our AGS diagnosis didn't come through until our children were 10 and 12 years old. But like you've suggested, they were struggling and suffering for a very long time prior to that. And so it was actually pretty much at the time of birth for our son in 2007 that we noticed that there were things about him that were different, things that we asked doctors about, that we questioned, that we watched him really suffer and struggle with a lot of pain as an infant, and nobody could quite figure out what was happening to him. Um, he went on to basically be in and out of ERs and doctors' offices until he was about 4 years old. Um, actually rather, sorry, at about 18 years old, we started noticing that he had a very different movement to his body when he started, yeah, when he started trying to walk and run. It became very concerning to us that it just wasn't average. It wasn't typical how he moved. And again, regardless of how many different people we brought it up to, I guess it just wasn't clear cut enough, and nobody quite knew why he was moving that way, but just told us just keep encouraging him to keep moving and using every part of his body. And so we just did all the best we could for the first 4 years with people telling us just keep encouraging him to use both sides of his body, just keep encouraging him to eat slower, to eat smaller bites, to how do you tell a toddler not to throw up after they eat every time? Really difficult things. But at about 4 years old, in a rather kind of coincidental way, they were actually looking for a disease in me, and said that it was important to MRI both of my children to see if they could have the disease. And that's when they identified that our son had had a stroke. So, based on the brain MRI imaging, they were able to tell us that he either had a stroke at the time of birth or prior to birth, so an in utero stroke. And it left him with about one third of his brain lobe is actually missing, entirely gone. And I guess that's an indicator of the fact that it either happened right at birth or prior to him being born. Um, and from there, then it seemed like some things started falling into place. Then they said, oh, it's cerebral palsy he has. That's why he doesn't move the way average children do. And so all of a sudden they realized that his left arm and his left leg and the left side of his face, they identified the drooping, and things started to make sense once they kind of had something, I guess, that they were going from. Um, so we thought we had things figured out for our son, and we thought we had some answers, but he did go on for many, many more years, just presenting in ways that were still abnormal to cerebral palsy and abnormal to stroke. And they just kept telling us, well, we don't know a lot about pediatric strokes, and your son is just very unique. Um, and so, yeah, by the time he was 10, he had a lot of different specialists, but those were kind of where we were at that point, was just stroke, cerebral palsy, very severe learning disabilities, and some seizure activity. But when he was 10, or rather when he was 8, is when his sister had a very abnormal episode that had us having to refocus much of our energy onto her. And it was actually that she woke up one morning and she was unable to stand, and she just collapsed to the ground. And she was just screaming and screaming. We didn't know what was
So
happening, and
scary.
absolutely terrifying. Yeah. We tried to get her to stand, and you would lift her and she just literally fell to the ground. So we rushed her into the pediatrician's office because they would see her right away, and they diagnosed her with having Guillain-Barré syndrome. Um, so again, that was a big shocker for us. We'd never even heard of that. We didn't understand why this would be happening. She lost all of her reflexes below the waist. So I guess that's what identified to them that there was something wrong neurologically or within the nerve synapses. Um, and I guess that's when we took a little bit harder look at our daughter, and they started asking us more questions about illnesses and how she had gotten through her toddler years and that. And some things started coming to light. Like, we always knew our daughter ran really high fevers. She could hit 100, and I think she's gone up to 104.8 before. And it just seemed like a norm for her, though, because they happened all the time. And so ever since she was a little baby, we just thought that's just how she is. But they suggested to us that that was a little bit of like showing an inappropriate immune response, and that could explain why she had maybe developed Guillain-Barré this time. But it didn't quite even add up to Guillain-Barré. It still confused everyone because she had ran a fever for 7 days before this episode of losing this ability to use her legs. And so they figured it had something to do with the fever, but nobody was quite sure why. Um, so that was when she was 6. And basically her health just started to deteriorate. So we consider that to have been kind of like I guess, a big kickoff event that did something just even a little bit more to her. Because she spent the next 4 years She recovered from losing the strength in her legs, like, within days, which also isn't normal for Guillain-Barré. It usually is a much longer lasting, disease. But what happened was she went on to have continuous episodes of where she would lose strength in her legs and where she would collapse, and she started having fainting spells. She started losing control of her bladder. She started developing rashes on her body that would come for absolutely no reasons. She started running the high fevers consistently, like every 6 weeks or so, for no reason. She wasn't sick, nothing was happening. We weren't getting anywhere.
Her hands started cramping up on a daily basis,
Yeah,
multiple times a day,
yeah.
having problems holding the pencils and things like that, right?
Yeah, we would be eating food and she would just drop the
Mhm.
fork. She couldn't, and we would look at her hand and it was like her hand was actually stuck,
Yeah.
but she couldn't move it. And so the utensil would fall, or she would be eating a drumstick and her hand would get stuck around a chicken drumstick and she couldn't let go and she would scream in panic. And then she had an episode where her eyes crossed. She hadn't been doing anything abnormal. They just crossed. It scared her so much. She couldn't see. She was having double vision. So we kept consulting with neurologists over 4 years, trying to figure out what was happening to her and our son and trying to see if there was any correlation. But both kept presenting with really different things aside from the fact that it all linked back to the brain. Like it seemed like something was happening in their brains, but in different ways. And it was just finally one neurologist that we went in one more time, and we were actually pretty much going in to almost say, we don't know that you can help us anymore. We don't know what to do. So maybe we should just find a way to help manage our children's pain and kind of try to move on. They were being poked and prodded and tested all the time. And she asked us one more time if our daughter was still having problems with her hand. And we said, yeah, it's not going away. Some days it'll happen for like 5 days in a row, then she'll be fine for a week, and then it'll come back. And she was a really great doctor, like really invested in us and wanted to help us try to figure this out. You could tell. And she actually started asking some questions to Shawn, who was at the appointment with us. And it's when she made an observation that she said, you have a problem, Shawn. There's something going on with your hand. And um, it was like a real light bulb moment where we just hadn't considered whether either of us had any kind of issues like we were seeing in our kids. And you know, kudos to my husband that apparently just thought these were things that happened to everyone, and nobody had ever asked him if having pain every day and having spasms in your body. And even as his wife of 20 years, I never thought to ask him these things because he just tolerated them. um, so it was her that sent us and said, there's something going on. And she flat out said, I think you guys have dystonia, but you don't have a clear cut case. And there's something more here. And we need to figure out what is causing this dystonia in your family. And she said, and I believe there is something genetic going on. So she sent us, we live on an island. So she sent us across to the mainland to a children's hospital with a referral to a neurologist and geneticist that work together on rare diseases. And they agreed. They saw the referral. They said there's definitely something going on with this family. I have a lot of medical problems and we weren't sure if it could be coming from my side or his. So they were very open-minded and said, we're just going to break it down and look at the whole family all over again from scratch. And they ran our blood work in Canada. Here they don't process it, so we had to send it off to Finland.
So,
I
yeah,
believe it was
that's right.
Finland where they did it for us.
Wow.
And so they did a full genome sequencing on, actually, first they just started with our daughter because she was the one that was most acutely being affected by the conditions happening. And I think
And
it
so
took about,
this is what year? This is when this is
this would have
happening at this
been
time?
when the kids were 9 and 11. So 2020,
Sounds about right.
yeah, 2020, 2019 possibly when it got sent off. And it took, I think it was about 4 months for the results to come back. In the meantime, our daughter struggled a lot. We did try a few different medications, neurological medications, to help with the pain and the dystonia events that were happening, but they weren't helping much. Um, and and during that time, actually, too, waiting for the results is when our son started to. He had never before presented with dystonia, and he started to present with it, but in true form of our family, not even in the same way necessarily as our daughter. So he started with his feet and legs. And so he started having drop events where he would just collapse because the muscles would contract and wouldn't release, and he would just scream in pain. So when the results finally came back and it showed that there was a mutation for Mila, we then informed them as well that our son had started developing now these dystonia events. And so they sent off the blood work for both of us, the parents, as well as our son, because he was presenting with issues too. And I think that took like another 2 or 3 months, and that came back. And yeah, and it identified that Shawn and both the children have the IFI mutation, and I believe they have it on an allele that's like ARG337. And what was really interesting to all the doctors is that it's only ever been found once before on that allele, so there's very little information. You could tell they were struggling even to tell us that basically all three of them have symptoms and presentation and believed to be presenting with Aicardi Goutieres Syndrome 7, but also with a possible crossover of Singleton-Merten syndrome. So we are very aware that our family possibly actually has both diseases, or as the doctors have said, it's possible that our family actually has a version of almost an unrecorded disease so far that is a crossover between the two diseases. So it was a lot to take in. We thought that we were just going to get answers to help one or both our kids, and instead we found out that all three of our family members were afflicted, and my heart broke a fair bit for my husband as well, as they kept asking more questions and finding out how much he had struggled throughout nearly his entire life. And people do ask us that often because they want to understand, well, but he's a grown man now and he has the mutation, and so he looks fine. But what people don't know is when you start asking the hard questions, how much he struggled and how much he suffered and how much he still does now as an adult, but has just persevered and pushed through more than anybody should have to.
I mean, I'm at a loss of words. You can even imagine how that makes you feel. Shawn, can you add, because you struggle your whole
Sure.
life with this?
Yeah. Well, when you're, born with something, I guess, and back in our days, right? That a lot of these things you just kind of tough through, or you become adapted to. You've had it, I've had it my whole life, so I don't know any different. Um, and then as the kids started presenting different symptoms, it was really hard for us to tie them together and to tie them to one specific thing, which we struggled with forever. But there was quite a few times where I would be able to relate, especially with more specifically the dystonia. When my daughter started having problems with her hands, gripping things and understanding, okay, well, I get that. I understand that. And I've had that too. I don't really see where the big problem was there. And it was a struggle between the two of us and the doctors to try and figure out, is this, what's going on here? And I think it was like talking to the last neurologist about, when they were linking me to it, and we just she started asking me more questions than anything, right? And we just started describing what I go, I'm a mechanic, so I use my hands a lot during the day, and quite a few times a day, I'll, reach around something my hand would stick, right? Kind of like that, right? And I got used to just, you hit it against something and you try and loosen it up, and then you go on about your day, and then it'll happen a few hours later, whatever, right? I mean, it was pretty consistent. As a kid, I definitely had the lower body dystonia as well with my feet and my legs. Went through a lot of that. Those are extremely painful. Depending on the week or the month, right? It could happen multiple times a day. It could happen twice in a week, whatever, right? It was very erratic. So when my son started presenting that with that stuff, it was relatable to me, and I understood it. I understood the feeling with it or what they were going through. So when we when she started kind of asking me questions and we started realizing that this is quite abnormal and that it shouldn't be, and then realizing what we could have and tying all the different types of symptoms together between the three of us, I think it was more a relief, to be perfectly honest, for me. I mean, it was nice to hear that whatever is going on with me, they could use me as a guinea pig. That was my first thought, to be perfectly honest. If this was a difficult task and they're learning about it and they want to try different things, then for sure, yeah, you use me all you want. My communication skills are better. Um, I could take it, right? Or whatever it is you guys want to do, I'll try it, and then if it works, great, we can use it on the kids. The unfortunate part is as a grown adult that looks otherwise healthy. I mean, getting healthcare in Canada is a little bit more challenging because of they kind of have to base it on severity, and there's a lot of backlog. So with the children, got a lot more attention than I would, right? So their doctors were able to attend to them a little faster, and which is great, which is perfect. Like I said, I just wish if there was if there was anything they needed to trial because they weren't sure how they were going to react, then for sure I would be there. But so that part of it was good. But other than that, it was more than just it was just a relief to have something that we had to go on to tie everything together to understand why they were going through what they were going through.
Yeah. And Shawn, that's that's good that it was a relief for you. And now I'm gonna put my mom and wife hat on. Camille, what was going on through your head? Because now you hear what's your
Yeah.
whole family, your whole world, has a very serious diagnosis.
Yeah. I think one of my saving graces was that things had been so abnormal for us for such a long time that pretty much when our son started presenting with problems and I saw that things weren't going to be clear cut, I knew right away that I was going to become an advocate for my children and that I also needed to gain a large level of confidence in myself to trust that parents do know. Me as a mother, I did know something was wrong and I did know when something was abnormal for my children. And so, before we even got this diagnosis, I had been having to research and understand and learn medical lingo and terms that I had never even heard of. But I did it because it was the situation that we can often find ourselves in North America, where it can go on for a long time not having clear cut answers. And it's it's hard. It is so hard on parents to know something is wrong but not be able to put a finger on it, and often because of that, not be able to treat it in the way that it needs to be treated to live the best quality of life. So, my first instinct was kind of like Shawn, actually. We did breathe a bit of a sigh of relief because we had gone on for so long, struggling to find the answers, struggling to find a way to let our kids live the best life that they possibly could, and they just weren't. Our daughter was passing out in all kinds of places. We were getting called to the school. She would have blackouts. Our son's learning disabilities were getting worse. His dystonia was getting worse. We were on such a bad path. So I think as much as this is terrifying and really terrifying for our family that they continue to repeat to us that there's no one like us, there's no one in the world alive right now with the mutation our family has. The only individual ever recorded passed away because of the mutation at the age of 16. So there is bleakness, there is fear, and a lot of unknowns ahead of us. But I think we feel quite well equipped to at least be able to move forward from here with some answers. And I mean, part of what I think we were even hoping to talk to you about today is also the treatment that we've been able to get
Yes.
them on, because that has been so incredibly life changing for all three of them. So it's easy for
Let's
us to
talk
find
about the
some hope.
treatment. How
Yeah.
did you guys hear about it? Because, I only have my own experience and I've heard a few stories here in the US, but how did you hear about it? Especially with such a long journey of finally getting a diagnosis.
Yeah. So, um, like I said, when we got the gene mutation notification, they told us the two diseases that our family likely has. I got to researching. My past profession was as a researcher, investigator, and I had the skill set, and it became my commitment every single day to try to understand and figure out what was happening. And so part of that was joining the AGS Facebook group. And, I also have to say, I think I got a lot of support from there to be able to make it through those first very hard days with this new information. And it was on the group there that I started to learn about Baricitinib, Olumiant. I also learned about the CHOP clinic in the United States. And so I took it upon myself to also reach out to them and speak with them and get some information from them because in Canada, even though the doctors that diagnosed it here, they told us they don't know anything about it. They said, there's nothing here for us to base anything on. So I knew I needed to do it. And that's what we did. We just started learning everything we could. So we found the information about the parasitinib from the Facebook group, and luckily, we were also able to link up with another Canadian family through that Facebook group. And we found out that their child was on the baricitinib on a trial out of the CHOP hospital in the United States. And then when COVID hit, they were granted permission to continue to receive the baricitinib treatment in Canada versus having to travel down to CHOP because of COVID restrictions. So some things in a way kind of fell into place because it created a new opportunity for us because of that exception having been made. So what we did was touch base with the family that lived in Ontario, found out who their doctors were and what pharmaceutical company they were receiving the Olumiant from, brought that information back to our doctors here in British Columbia, told them that we have found information, that we have found research studies that indicate that this could help our children and my husband. It took a little bit of convincing, but they made some phone calls, tried to contact Lilly Pharmaceutical in Canada to get the prescription prescribed. We're told no, that they couldn't get it for us and that we would not be eligible. And so I went back and said, no, that's not good enough. And we're going to try again. And so we
So
got
share
more.
with me, as you're sharing the story, tell me a little bit more of the timeline, just so that our listeners can have an easier time following about how, all these things that you did. How long was that and how long did it take?
So I think like the gene mutation confirmation for everyone came in like January. And we
2020?
2020.
Okay.
Yeah. Then by the spring of 2020, so I want to say maybe March is when we were first able to see the specialists in person at the Children's Hospital because it had all just been done virtually. They had ordered this blood work virtually and stuff. Met them in the spring. They gave us some information, basically did physical assessments and said they all needed to consult. They needed to work as a team and they would need some time and would have to get back to us. And so we left without really anything in place. And then by June, we had a phone call with the rheumatologist from the Children's Hospital. And that's when I asked her to investigate getting Olumiant for our family. And it was about beginning of August when she got back to us saying, no, I'm sorry, they've denied it. There's no way for us to get it for you. And so I said, no, that's not good enough. Somebody's not understanding something properly. If another family in Canada can get it, then we can get it too. So we just need more documentation or more information. So I contacted the family from out east again, got their actual neurologist name, all their contact information, and and actually got the forms for also requesting what we call compassionate care coverage in Canada, so that the pharmaceutical company will help pay for some of it, and brought that back to our rheumatologist in about September of 2020.
Okay.
And it went through. So we finally reached the right department in Lilly for them to say, oh, yes, okay, we will approve you for this experimental treatment. So we understand, it's not approved for pediatrics, it's not approved for the use we're all trying to use it for. But they agreed to all those terms. They agreed that there was enough families and evidence right now suggesting it could help us. So that was about like that happened rather quickly. It was like end of
Yeah,
September. The approval came through pretty instantly once we got, I
they
guess, to the
were
right department.
they were really good too as well. They were
Really
very
good.
thorough and followed up, phone calls, things of that nature, right? They were really great to deal with, to be honest with
Yeah, all the people at Lilly Pharmaceutical, I mean, they really made it personal.
you.
Like they really cared about us as individuals and our family and truly seemed to want to help us feel better. So they actually got everything in place, and I believe it was October 20. Oh, see, my timeline's 1 year off, actually, sorry, because 'cause they've just been on the meds
Okay.
now for 1 year. So it was October
Mhm.
2021 when they started the treatment.
Yeah.
So from diagnosis of the gene mutation to treatment was about 10 months.
Everyone that you were talking to get it approved was based in Canada the whole entire time.
That is my
Yeah.
understanding that it is Lilly Canada that we were going
Okay.
through. Um, yeah.
No, this is just to give everyone perspective and
Yeah,
to tell everyone the facts because as a parent that just got the diagnosis, we're all thinking, well, I need to do that too. But just
Mhm.
to set expectations, that,
yeah,
that's what
Yeah,
happened in
makes sense.
Canada, and we need to do further research if we're listening from Mexico or the US, right? That's why I want to make
yeah.
sure that we're all following along and we don't forget that. So you have the treatment in your hands as of, we said, October?
October 2021, yeah, because we just passed 1 year.
Okay. And so,
Yeah.
tell me how that's going. How did you notice it was working? How's everyone doing since started taking it?
And so to be clear as well, as Shawn said, because things move faster for pediatrics here, the children were put on it in October 2021, but it actually took an additional 5 months before we could get Shawn in to
Oh,
see the right type of doctors, to put through the
Yeah.
paperwork to Lilly, to get him applied for it. So there was a significant delay. So, much to Shawn's frustration, because as he said, he was always willing to test everything first. And, when we were waiting for the Olumiant, we did go through lots of trials with Tegretol, levodopa-carb. We did a lot of the things that other families do as well. And we did. We tried them on Shawn first to see how they would work and how they might respond in our children. Um, but for the kids, when they started it in October 2021, it was um, it was mind blowing to us that within 4 weeks we could see things changing. We could see them getting healthier. It just seemed like surreal because we didn't think anything could act that fast and have that
Mhm.
great of a reaction on them. So we saw our daughter not developing fevers monthly anymore. We saw our both children's spontaneous rashes not there every 3 weeks. um, and mostly as well, the dystonia. We saw that our kids could actually, you know what, I think it was kind of like when we hit about a 7-day mark and we both looked at each other and went, neither of them have complained. Neither
Mhm.
of them have had a screaming. Like, we had to take videos of these things happening to share with medical professionals, and we're like, we haven't taken a video in a week. They weren't in pain all the time. Our daughter as well, we couldn't help but continuously like almost laugh about it because she was eating finally. Like she was 10, 11 years old, and we had eating problems with her nearly her entire life. She was just nauseous every time after she had finished eating. She would sometimes have to ball up in excruciating pain from like some kind of spasms happening inside after she would eat. And It was like she was sitting at the table eating full meals with us, like
Mm.
she had never done in her life. Um, so yeah, I would say time-wise, again, our family was incredibly fortunate that within about 4 weeks, we started seeing some of these life-changing things happening for them. Even though they had told us it could take up to 8 weeks before we would even see any effect, they responded really quickly.
Wow. And let me ask this question because it's different from everywhere. How are you able to afford this medication? Because this medication is very expensive. So do you mind
Yeah,
sharing us if it's fully
for sure.
covered or
Yeah. So again, Lily may or may not like us divulging this, and I don't know if it's different across different countries, but in Canada right now, and again, we have 3 family members on it, so that price tag gets really high. Our family's cost per month is $12,000 to have all 3 of them on the treatment. So that is absolutely a dollar amount that would make it impossible for probably 99% of the families in this world right now. I don't care where you live. We have been very fortunate in that our extended benefit plan, so we have in Canada, if you work for someone, you usually have some kind of extended benefits, and we go through an extended benefit plan that covers 80% of the cost. And they never even asked for any additional documentation or anything. They just started paying the 80%. Lilly applied to them. We had to provide some information, and they told Lilly Pharmaceutical they would pay 80%. But 20% still left. What did we say? So 12,000. So that was still nearly $2,500 a month that we would have to cover. And again, that's still a lot of money for most families. And Lilly Pharmaceutical came through for us. We submitted an application for a request for compassionate care coverage. We indicated how this medication could be life changing for our family and requested and asked for them to please consider covering the additional costs so that our family could live a healthier life. And they agreed to.
wow. Makes me really happy because although this is not a cure, this is a very effective treatment from what we know today. And with what we know today is enough for us to all go after it and do our very best to get the treatment for our family members as soon as we can. And I'm happy you guys are able to get this. Like I'm generally happy because I know what that means and I know I've seen it with my kid as well. And Shawn, how are you feeling today?
Yeah, it's quite a bit better. I mean, the dystonia is probably the first thing that sticks out of my mind is the visible difference, right? I don't no longer get those attacks like I do, and I can definitely tell that disappeared almost immediately. It probably took within the first week. You notice a big difference between when you're on the medication when you're not, right? Aside from that, general health wise, it's just you're not as sick anymore. You're not as sickly. You don't go through any events. Things are pretty status quo, if you will, and you realize after a while how sickly you probably were. It's hard to recall all the instances, but it's easy to say that it made a huge difference, and it made it for sustainability in your life, right? It was just everything was normal again, right? And
I remember actually, like, again, the same thing about like 3 weeks or so once he was on the treatment. And again, he may almost not remember because now you get into your status quo of feeling good, but he was mind boggled at how much pain he had been through his entire life and how different, how amazing it could feel to not have pain always firing in your brain and that just being your status quo. And on a few occasions where he's accidentally forgotten to take his pills for, say, a day or two, he will, and just the same as our children, they can't go more than 2 days without missing a dose. And if any of the 3 of them do, you see it come back and it comes back with a vengeance. And they will be in excruciating pain again, or they will start to run a fever. And it's, as Shawn has said, he's like, if there was ever a need for some kind of more proof that this works, that this is helping, that's it right there. Like you
mhm.
take it away and they all go back to struggling and being in pain again.
Your family is so important. in advocating, because my 10-month-old cannot tell me all these things. So many kids cannot tell us this. And the fact that you're saying, I feel better, and it makes, I don't have to live with those symptoms and so much pain. And dystonia, the only times I've seen is from what you spoke earlier, videos, me having to record videos for our doctors and for to show them what the kids look like, how much pain and what it looks like. And if you've never seen it before, I hope you never have to see it. So Shawn, hearing and Camille, your family's testimonial, it's huge because the kids cannot speak and say these things that you guys are
Yeah.
saying. And I hope that if there's any medical reps out there, doctors listening to this, they're really paying attention, because like I said, your family, it's very important. And hearing those words that you feel better, Shawn, it makes me feel good for my son. It makes me feel really good. It makes me really happy because he smiles, but I mean, um, you saying the words out loud makes me really, really happy. So thank you guys for sharing this. It's
Oh,
huge. And
I really hope that so many other parents will take a moment to listen to, as you say, even just these last few, minutes of shares, because even watching you express how this feels to you, they all truly deserve that. And we were there watching our nonverbal children suffer and not knowing what to do. And if we can give anyone a slight bit of comfort to know that it is our belief that being on this medication absolutely increases their quality of life, reduces their pain, and helps everybody just live a more wholesome life together. Your children may not be able to tell you that, as you say. And, when we talk about the timelines as well of how fast we kind of were able to get the Lilly approval from when our genetic mutation was, I want people to also know that timeline may change for you, and that timeline may be significantly longer for you. And I think it is important to know that the fact that our children were older, the fact that our children could verbalize and follow very specific instructions for testings was part of what helped expedite the process. And so I don't want you to give up or think that this will never happen for you or that it should happen faster, because we also don't want to rush things with children that cannot communicate as well as ours. So there can be different timelines for all of us, but we hope that you'll at least see the hope, and we hope that Lily will see the hope and the life-changing, effects and part that they can play in this for all of us.
thank you so much for saying that. So I like how you're saying, be patient, be persistent, listening to you remind us that, our each kid is different, right? So we cannot just rush through this.
Mhm.
But I do want you to continue sharing some words of wisdom, especially to those parents that just heard the words yesterday or today that their son or daughters have AGS. What words do you have to share to them that just got the diagnosis to the worst day of our lives, right?
Yeah. You know, I think one of the most important things is to allow yourself to grieve and allow yourself to feel some pain and know that it's okay, that is part of this. Um, but that also that diagnosis doesn't dictate anything about your future, that you still have some control over your future and your child's future. And so you take the time you need now, and then you pull it together, and you know that you brought this child into this world, and this child was given to you because you are the best person that could be in their life right now. And so I want everyone to know that there are bad days, there are horrible days. And then there are great days, and there will be great days in your future too. But you will have to go through many of the miserable ones, and it's okay too, and it's okay to feel all the emotions. Um, but hope is really important. Hope doesn't mean that you have a guarantee to live 50 years. Hope doesn't mean that you have a guarantee to not feel any pain this year, but it means that you're hopeful, looking for some better days.
if you're not watching the video, I really want to hug Camille right now. And I'm really thankful again for your family, not because we're meeting this way, but because, you're my first AGS patient, Shawn, and Camille, so close with three of you guys living with her and being part of her family that, is that I'm hearing firsthand, besides my son who wouldn't stop crying at night and we didn't know what was wrong. So I'm very thankful and I feel very honored to be interviewing you today and for amplifying your voices. I am lost because this is such a unique experience and I wish we were not meeting this way. That's the most important thing I want you to know, but I'm really thankful we are meeting today.
Well, I really hope that in the future we can meet in person, and I truly hope that also all the parents know that we need to also commit to taking an active role. I said it in the beginning. I signed up to be an advocate when I saw that I didn't have an average son. And every day right now, I still advocate. And I advocate even for individuals that I don't know right now, because that is the greatest strength that we have as human beings, is to be able to speak up for those that can't speak up for themselves.
Shawn, Camille, any other last words you would like to say as we are getting to wrap up this podcast?
No, I guess maybe thank you for what you're doing. I mean, spreading the word and talking about it, getting that information out there, and sharing everybody else's experiences. That was something that was difficult to find in the beginning. That's for sure. Was to find the information, and the more people that talk about it, the better. And then the more information, I think it's just more reassuring when you can start linking back and seeing a lot of the similarities of what people are going through. And yeah, for sure. I hope that people can look at me and say, well, there's hope, and there's when you get that diagnosis, it's not it's life altering in a way that now you have a path that you can take. And the more we learn, the more we talk about it, the more we share, the better the more traveled that path becomes. And when we got multiple people with us, it's a lot easier. Right?
Yes. Well, Shawn and Camille, thank you so much again. We'll be in touch. This won't be the last time we talk. If y'all need anything, please let us know. We're here for you and your family. And we'll be, for those who are listening, please reach out to the group. Shawn and Camille mentioned the AGS AA group. So I'll leave a link in the description box of this podcast. And y'all have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Bye.